But let's go to a positive cabinet appointment, cabinet secretary that we're going to get. And guys, if there is one gift to the left that the Biden administration has wholeheartedly made, it's got to be Representative Deb Haaland being chosen as the Secretary of the Interior. Deb Haaland is one of literally the first two Native American representatives to ever be elected to Congress. And she's going to be the first Native American to serve as any cabinet secretary. But what makes her, what makes this incredibly historic is the fact that the Department of the Interior oversees the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which, manages diplomacy with the sovereign nations across the country. That's, Native American reservations, which are sovereign nations. And so check out, this is from her opening statements at the, for her confirmation hearings, where she speaks her native tongue, which is very, very, just, again, historic and something we should take note of.
Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, members of the committee, thank you so much for having me here today. I wouldn't be here without the love and support of my child Soma, my partner Skip, who is with me this morning, sitting behind me, my mom, Mary Toya, who's watching from Isla de Pueblo, my extended family, and generations of ancestors who have sacrificed so much so I could be here today. I acknowledge that we are on the ancestral homelands of the Nacotchtank, Anacostan, and Piscataway people. As many of you know, my story is unique. Although today I serve as a member of Congress and was the vice chair of the House Natural Resources Committee, if confirmed, I would be the first Native American to serve as cabinet secretary. This historic nature of my confirmation is not lost on me, but I will say it's not about me. Rather, I hope this nomination would be an inspiration for Americans moving forward together as one nation and creating opportunities for all of us. As the daughter of a Pueblo woman, I was taught to value hard work. My mother is a Navy veteran, was a civil servant at the Bureau of Indian Education for 25 years, and she raised 4 kids as a military wife. My dad, the grandson of immigrants, was a 30-year career Marine who served in Vietnam. He received the Silver Star and is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. I spent summers in Mesita.
Wow. So, I mean, this really is historic. Deb Haaland, I mean, think about this, 2021, hundreds of years after, the initial contact with Europeans here in the New World, decimated native populations with disease. Some estimates are above 90% mortality with contacts with disease like smallpox. And, then of course, just the open genocide that the U.S. government had against Native Americans, Indian removal, Andrew Jackson, the reservation systems being complete abject, pushing Native Americans onto, the most unproductive land, defacing, sacred sites, developing over burial grounds. I played some local footage of that earlier, and now we have this. And the other thing is, within Native American communities, the reverence and respect for service and even national service, and specifically in the military, is widespread. It's a long-held tradition. This empire, as I said earlier, that has brutalized Native Americans and Indigenous people, yet they still serve and in the public sphere in that way and civically. And Deb Haaland is going to be in charge of the the Interior Department, which also oversees energy, managing public lands. And here's a Native American journalist and what he how significant he sees it. It's from Democracy Now! Give this a listen.
I think that she came with a presence that made me very proud to be Native. She, of course, introduced herself in her language. She acknowledged the territory of the people on whose land the hearing was taking place. And when you juxtapose just her presence in that hearing with, the history of Interior, a department that was once led by a man named Alexander Stewart, who described the Interior Department's role and the United States policy as needing to be one of civilizing or exterminating Native people. That's actually the quote that he used. I think that it was a very, very powerful and important sort of moment for Indian country. As you mentioned, Native people tuned in from across the country to watch that hearing in the middle of the day. As soon as we get the first ever Native cabinet secretary, nominated, conservatives act like, we're going to take away their land and their way of life and things like that. And they literally, have used things like way of life in some of their quotes, criticizing Secretary Designate Haaland. And,
wow.
Listening to, a number of Western politicians talk about how, how perhaps Native people are going to turn around and take away things from them, strikes me as deeply ironic, perhaps even sort of a Freudian expression of the conservative id.
Wow, that's an incredible point. So he's right. The Republicans who were, challenging Haaland in in her confirmation hearings, were just like tripping over themselves to, attack her and find any kind of handhold, with their arguments, and really only just embarrass themselves. And keep in mind, we're coming off of the most openly, unabashedly white supremacist administration, which is the Donald Trump administration for the Republican Party. And, unlike them making a big, hullabaloo about near attendance tweets, which, is funny because it's so, just matters so little, tweets really in the scope of things, going after this historic appointee, for this. Because another thing they found threatening was that Deb Haaland protested at Standing Rock against the oil pipeline at Standing Rock, stood in solidarity with Indigenous communities and people there, and the environmentalists who stood against this development of a pipeline. But listen to some of their arguments. Just leave it to Republicans.
Said that if you had it your way, and I quote, you'd stop oil and gas leasing on public lands. As Secretary, you will get to have it your way. Will you recommend extending the leasing moratorium? And how do you justify this moratorium with the requirements of the federal law under the Mineral Leasing Act?
Senator, it's my understanding that it is a pause on just new leases, not existing valid leases. And if I'm confirmed as Secretary, it is President Biden's agenda, not my own agenda, that I would be moving forward.
The pipeline, are you still, you were there at Access Pipeline, which I say,
here he
in
talks
the case
about
of the Dakota Access Pipeline, which I say has been operating now for 3 years safely, you were there and protested the pipeline. Are you still opposed to that pipeline?
Senator, yes, I did go to stand with the water protectors during that several years back. The reason I did that is because I agreed with the tribe that they felt they weren't consulted in the best way. I know that tribal consultation is important, and that was the reason that I was there.
Joe Manchin was criticized for being undecided.
I believe we all have a stake in the future of our country, and I believe that every one of us, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, shares a common bond: our love for the outdoors and a desire and obligation to keep our nation livable for future generations.
Fantastic. And so, this is a big, this is a big move. I am, I think if you're going to give Joe Biden props anywhere, this is it. The Interior Department is very important. So we have nearby here on the Central Coast, it kind of straddles San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties, as you head out, I can't remember the name of the highway on the way to Bakersfield, we have the Carrizo Plains National Monument. And, it's a huge open space, the Carrizo Plains, but it's been the target for oil developers. There are some oil extraction out there, but famously under Trump, and I'm blanking on the name of his Interior Secretary. What was that guy? Oh my gosh! So they opened it up for new. Ryan Zinke, that was his name. I believe he had some kind of corruption scandal, of course, as they all did. But they opened up a lot of national monuments to consider them for new oil leases, and the Carrizo Plain was one of them. So the Interior Department can affect communities far and wide. It can affect natural resources near you. It can affect open spaces, public lands that you might not know or you're close to and can enjoy. That's public land. That's our land. That's your land. It's my land. This land is right, like the old Woody Guthrie song. So that's the kind of stuff. It's super important. Energy is important, especially these days, whether it's the power grid going down in Texas or, climate change, creating wildfires, rolling blackouts, whether it's wildfires, people burning to death, or in Texas, people freezing to death. It's important that we get a handle of energy. We manage public lands. All of that is vitally important. Climate change is a crisis. So I'm glad to see somebody like Haaland in there.